Marcus Reed gripped the steering wheel tightly as the Texas sun dipped low behind the endless flatlands. His pickup rumbled steadily along Highway 287, the road stretching out like a ribbon carved through the dusty expanse. The air was thick and heavy with the scent of dry earth and gasoline, a stark reminder that this stretch of highway was a lifeline for countless travelers and truckers hauling goods across the vast state. Marcus's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the sprawling sky behind him, painted in shades of orange and purple. It was the kind of evening that invited quiet reflection, but Marcus had little time for that tonight. The highway was alive with motion, but it was a peculiar kind of energy. Trucks blaring horns near rest stops, the occasional rumble of engines accelerating away from stoplights, and the low murmur of radios tuning into country stations. Marcus had been on the road for hours, traveling from Fort Worth to Amarillo. But he wasn't here for the journey. He was searching for something he couldn't quite name, a distraction from the ghosts of his past that clung to him like a shadow. The open road offered a strange kind of freedom, a place where he could be just another face in the blur of passing vehicles and neon signs. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. As his truck pulled into a dimly lit rest area, Marcus slowed to a crawl. The lot was a scatter of worn asphalt, dotted with cracked concrete islands where tired travelers stretched their legs and refueled. The hum of idling engines mixed with murmurs of conversations and the occasional bark of a stray dog searching for scraps. Marcus's gaze drifted toward the far edge of the lot, where a cluster of semi-trucks sat parked under flickering fluorescent lights. It was here that he noticed something that immediately pulled him from his reverie. By the side of the road, near a patch of dry grass and discarded trash, a man, rough around the edges, with greasy hair and a stained shirt, was aggressively kicking at a small dog. The animal, a scruffy mutt with matted fur and pleading eyes, whimpered but tried to slink away, its body trembling as it attempted to escape the man's wrath. The trucker's face twisted into a cruel sneer, his movements sharp and unrestrained as he struck the dog again and again. The scene was raw and ugly, an act of cruelty that Marcus could not ignore. Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel, his jaw clenching as he watched. The rest area was crowded enough that no one else seemed to notice or care. People passed by, heads down, smartphones in hand, oblivious to the violence unfolding just yards away. But Marcus had been trained to observe, to read the subtle signs of danger and distress. His time as a Navy SEAL had honed his senses to a razor's edge. Nothing escaped his notice, especially when it involved the vulnerable. Without hesitation, Marcus killed the engine and stepped out into the cool evening air. The sounds of the highway faded behind him as he approached the man, his boots crunching on the gravel. His presence was calm but commanding, the kind that carried an unspoken warning. The trucker looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes before hardening into defensiveness. "Hey," Marcus said, his voice low but firm. "Leave that dog alone." The man spat on the ground, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Mind your own business, buddy," he snapped. "This mutt's nothing but a nuisance." Marcus's gaze didn't waver. "That dog didn't ask for this. You're hurting it." The trucker laughed bitterly, a harsh, grating sound. "You don't know what you're talking about? It's just a dumb animal, probably stolen or diseased." He turned away, clearly trying to brush off the confrontation. But Marcus didn't move. He stepped closer, his posture steady and unyielding. "You can't treat a living creature like that. It's wrong." The man's face twisted with anger. You got a problem with me? Why don't you just keep driving? The tension crackled between them like static electricity. Marcus's mind raced through the options. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he wasn't going to walk away either. The dog whimpered again, flinching as the trucker glanced back, clearly irritated by Marcus's persistence. The man scoffed and finally turned on his heel, muttering curses under his breath as he climbed back into his truck. The engine roared to life, and the vehicle pulled away, tires kicking up dust and gravel. Marcus watched him leave, the sting of helplessness gnawing at him. The dog remained cowering near the roadside, its eyes wide with fear, body trembling as it tried to make itself small. Marcus knelt down slowly, careful not to startle the animal. "Hey there, buddy. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." His voice was soft, steady, a stark contrast to the harshness of the man who had just left. The dog's ears perked slightly, and it took a hesitant step toward him, still wary but desperate for kindness. He scanned the area. No one else was paying attention. The dog needed help, and Marcus knew that if he didn't act, the animal's fate would be bleak. He glanced back at his truck, then at the dog, whose ribs showed beneath its dirty fur, a silent testament to neglect and hardship. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled granola bar he'd been saving for later. Breaking off a piece, he held it out. The dog's nose twitched, and after a long moment, it edged closer, sniffing the food before finally taking it gently from his hand. The gesture sparked a faint warmth inside Marcus, a fragile connection between two survivors on different paths. He stood up and looked down the highway. The sun was nearly gone, and the chill of night was creeping in. The rest area was quieting, the last few travelers heading inside for the night. Marcus knew he couldn't just leave the dog here, injured and alone. He had to find a way to help it. But questions swirled in his mind. How far should he go? What risks would he face getting involved? The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Marcus Reed wasn't going to turn his back on this stray tonight. The sun had slipped below the horizon, leaving the Texas highway bathed in twilight's deepening shadows. Marcus Reed stood near the edge of the rest area, the scruffy dog by his side trembling beneath the faint glow of a nearby street lamp. The animal's ribs showed through its matted fur, and its eyes held the haunted look of someone or something that had known nothing but fear and pain. Marcus's heart tightened. He'd seen plenty in his years, on missions overseas, in the darkest corners of the world. But cruelty like this, so raw and unfiltered, struck a nerve he couldn't ignore. The trucker's truck was long gone, its taillights swallowed by the night. But the echoes of his violence lingered in the dog's wary body language and trembling paws. Marcus crouched down again, speaking softly. "It's okay. You're safe now." The dog's ears twitched, but it didn't move closer. Years of neglect had taught it that safety was a fragile illusion. Marcus scanned the area. The rest stop had emptied out, leaving only a handful of late-night travelers milling near the convenience store. None had noticed the abuse, or if they had, they chose to look the other way. It was a scene he'd come to recognize in his travels. Cruelty inflicted in plain sight, hidden by indifference and distance. His mind flicked to the trucker, the man who had kicked this poor animal without a second thought. The image was burned into Marcus's memory. A rough, unshaven face twisted with anger, a callous disregard that chilled him to the bone. The man had been reckless, harsh, and utterly unaware that someone was watching. Marcus had felt the old instincts kick in, that sharp edge of vigilance that never fully faded after years as a Navy SEAL. He'd confronted the trucker, but the man had simply brushed him off, driving away like it was no big deal. But Marcus Reed didn't walk away. He looked down at the dog again, noting the cuts and bruises marring its small frame. It wasn't just fear this animal carried. It was pain, physical and emotional. Marcus knew healing wouldn't be easy, not in a place like this. The dog needed care, shelter, and someone willing to fight for it. A sudden noise, a low rumble, drew Marcus's attention. A semi-truck rolled into the parking lot, headlights cutting through the darkness. The driver parked near the convenience store. Stepping out into the cool night air, Marcus watched as the man lit a cigarette, his face obscured by shadows. The scene felt eerily familiar, and Marcus's jaw tightened. He turned back to the dog. "Come on, let's get you out of here." The dog hesitated but followed as Marcus moved toward his truck. He opened the door and reached into the back seat where he kept a worn blanket. Wrapping the dog gently, he lifted it into the passenger side, careful not to jostle any broken bones or wounds. The dog whimpered softly but didn't resist. Marcus settled behind the wheel, the dog nestled against him, its small body rising and falling with labored breaths. He started the engine and pulled back onto the highway, the headlights cutting a path through the darkness. The road ahead was long, but Marcus was determined. This was no longer just about one dog. It was about the countless animals suffering in silence along these lonely stretches of road. As he drove, Marcus's thoughts churned. He wanted to find help, someone who could tend to the dog's injuries and offer a safe place to recover. But the reality was grim. Animal abuse was common along this stretch of highway, often ignored or dismissed by local authorities, overwhelmed with other priorities. Marcus had seen it firsthand during his travels, strays beaten, abandoned, left to fend for themselves while the world looked away. He thought back to the trucker's careless cruelty, the way the man had dismissed the dog as nothing more than a nuisance. It was a mindset Marcus couldn't accept. Every life mattered, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. Hours later, Marcus pulled into a small town just off the highway. The streets were quiet, illuminated by flickering street lamps and neon signs from closed shops. He parked near a modest veterinary clinic that still had its sign lit, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Inside, he found Dr. Elena Martinez, a woman with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. She listened intently as Marcus explained the situation, her expression darkening with concern. "This poor thing has been through hell," she said gently, kneeling to examine the dog. "We'll do everything we can." Marcus nodded, relief washing over him. For the first time since he'd found the dog, there was a glimmer of hope. But as he sat in the waiting room, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The cruelty he'd witnessed was part of a larger problem, one that demanded more than just bandages and medicine. Outside, the night deepened, and the highway stretched endlessly in both directions. Marcus Reed knew that somewhere along those miles, other animals were suffering, unseen and unheard, and he was the only one standing between them and the darkness. He glanced back at the dog, now resting quietly under Dr. Martinez's care. The small life was fragile, but fighting. Marcus's resolve hardened. He wouldn't stop here, not until every cry for help was answered. Tonight, the road had shown him a harsh truth. But Marcus was ready to face it head on, no matter the cost. The sterile hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Marcus Reed sat in the waiting room of the small veterinary clinic, the scent of antiseptics and medicine filling the air. The scruffy dog, wrapped in a soft towel, lay on a metal table just beyond the glass partition. Marcus's fingers drummed lightly on his knee, his mind racing with conflicting thoughts. He had done what he could for now. But the moment he stepped back into the cool night outside, the weight of the situation pressed down on him like a stone. He had confronted the truck driver who had brutally kicked the dog earlier, but the man's dismissive attitude had left a bitter taste in Marcus's mouth. "Mind your own business," the man had sneered before driving off, leaving the injured animal to suffer alone. That encounter played over and over in Marcus's mind, a harsh reminder of how easily people could turn a blind eye to suffering. The indifference was almost worse than the cruelty itself. Marcus rose from the chair, stepping outside the clinic into the quiet night. The Texas sky stretched wide and dark above him, stars faintly twinkling behind a veil of clouds. He exhaled deeply, the cool air filling his lungs. This wasn't the kind of mission he'd signed up for in the Navy, but the stakes felt just as real now. The dog's pain was a symptom of a larger problem, one that Marcus couldn't ignore. As he paced the parking lot, his phone buzzed softly in his pocket. He pulled it out, the screen lighting up with a message from his sister, an animal shelter volunteer back in Dallas. Sarah's quick responses and steady dedication had made her a valuable ally whenever Marcus found himself tangled in situations involving vulnerable creatures. He typed a brief update, explaining the dog's condition and the abuse he'd witnessed. Within minutes, Sarah replied, urging him to get the dog to a shelter or rescue group if possible. "They have resources and connections," she wrote. "But be careful. Some of these cases get complicated fast." Marcus nodded to himself. He knew all too well the complications involved when trying to intervene in situations like this. Legal red tape, apathetic authorities, sometimes even hostility from those who saw such efforts as meddling. But he also knew that if no one stepped up, nothing would change. The dog's fate, like so many others, depended on someone willing to fight. He walked back into the clinic just as Dr. Elena Martinez emerged from the treatment area, her face lined with exhaustion but resolute. "The dog has several bruises and a few cuts, but thankfully no broken bones," she said quietly. "It's going to need rest and antibiotics, maybe some pain relief. It's in rough shape emotionally, too. Fear like that doesn't heal overnight." Marcus met her gaze. "Is there any way to keep it here for a while? Or somewhere safe?" She hesitated. "Our resources are limited. I can keep it for a day or two, but after that it'll need a foster or shelter placement." His jaw tightened. "I'll figure something out." Later, as he prepared to leave, Marcus's thoughts churned with an uneasy mix of determination and doubt. He had intervened, but the dog's suffering was far from over. Worse still, the trucker's callousness was emblematic of a wider problem, one that Marcus suspected was deeply entrenched along this stretch of highway. Animal abuse wasn't isolated. It was happening regularly, hidden behind the anonymity of passing trucks and indifferent passers-by. Back in his truck, Marcus scrolled through his phone, searching for local animal welfare groups. The list was sparse, their resources spread thin across vast rural areas. Many shelters were overwhelmed, understaffed, and underfunded. It was clear that the system struggled to keep up with need. Marcus felt a surge of frustration. The dog's plight was a symptom of a broken chain, one that required more than just individual acts of kindness. As he drove toward the next town, Marcus's mind replayed what he had witnessed at the rest stop. The man's harsh kicks, the dog's trembling form, the indifferent glances of other travelers. He imagined how many other animals suffered in silence, abandoned or abused, their cries lost amid the noise of the highway. When he stopped for a late-night coffee at a truck stop diner, Marcus struck up a conversation with the waitress, a middle-aged woman named Connie with tired eyes but a warm smile. When Marcus mentioned the dog, her face tightened. "You wouldn't believe the stories we hear here," Connie said softly. "Truckers who don't care, folks who just don't want the hassle. Animals get left behind all the time. We try to help when we can, but it feels like a losing battle." Marcus nodded slowly. "Do you know if anyone's tried to get the authorities involved? Animal control? The sheriff's office?" Connie shrugged. "They get calls, sure. But out here it's different. There's a lot of people who think animals are just property. And sometimes, folks are scared to speak up, worried about retaliation, or just tired of fighting a system that doesn't listen." The conversation left Marcus with a heavy sense of the challenges ahead. He wasn't just dealing with one man's cruelty. He was facing an entire culture of neglect and apathy. But retreat wasn't an option. Back on the road, Marcus's thoughts returned to the dog. It had survived the trucker's abuse. But what about the next threat waiting just beyond the horizon? The more he considered it, the clearer it became. If the cycle was to break, someone had to step in, to shine a light on the hidden cruelties and stand for those who couldn't. He drove through the night, the miles stretching on beneath the headlights, each one a reminder that the journey was only beginning. The dog's whimper from the passenger seat was faint but persistent, a small plea for help that Marcus refused to ignore. The early morning sun cast a pale golden light over the quiet streets as Marcus Reed pulled into the gravel driveway of a modest animal rescue center just outside a small Texas town. The worn wooden sign at the entrance read, "Hope Haven Animal Rescue," its faded letters a testament to years of tireless work and dedication. Marcus sat in his truck for a moment, glancing down at the scruffy dog curled up on a blanket in the passenger seat. The animal's breathing was steady now, a small victory after the rough night they'd endured together. He reached for his phone and dialed a number he'd been given by Dr. Elena Martinez at the clinic. The voice on the other end was warm but cautious. A woman named Sarah, a volunteer coordinator for the rescue. Marcus explained the situation briefly: the abuse by the trucker, the dog's injuries, and the urgent need for a safe place. "We can take him in," Sarah said without hesitation. "We'll make sure he gets the care he needs and find him a foster home. It won't be easy, but we'll do everything we can." Marcus felt a flicker of hope. After days on the road, after witnessing cruelty and indifference, here was a chance for something better. He carefully lifted the dog from the truck, cradling it close as they walked toward the small, weathered building. The dog's eyes met his, filled with a fragile trust that Marcus vowed not to betray. Inside, the rescue center was a hive of quiet activity. Volunteers bustled about, tending to cages, preparing food, and administering medicine. The air smelled faintly of wood shavings and fresh laundry, a stark contrast to the harshness of the highway where Marcus had found the dog. Sarah greeted him with a firm handshake and a grateful smile. "We'll get him settled right away," she said. "But I have to warn you, cases like this aren't uncommon. We see animals who've been hurt, abandoned, or worse. It's heartbreaking, but it's why we do what we do." Marcus nodded. "I want to help however I can. This isn't just about one dog, it's bigger than that." Sarah's eyes hardened with understanding. Most people don't realize how widespread the problem is. Along these highways, animals suffer in silence. Abuse, neglect, it's all too common and often ignored. As the team began examining the dog, Marcus took a moment to explore the center. Walls were lined with photos of rescued animals, each one a story of survival and second chances. Flyers and posters urged the community to report abuse and support local shelters. It was a small beacon of hope amid the vastness of the problem. Sarah led Marcus to a small office, her expression serious. "We're stretched thin. Funding is tight, and there's only so much we can do without outside help. But if people like you get involved, we can start making a difference." Marcus leaned forward, determination settling in his eyes. "I want to do more than just help one dog. I want to find those responsible for this abuse, make sure they're held accountable." Sarah nodded slowly. "That takes courage, and it's not easy. There's resistance. Some people don't want the truth to come out. But if we work together, we can shine a light on the darkness." They talked for a long time, sharing information and ideas. Marcus learned about the challenges the rescue faced: limited manpower, slow responses from authorities, and the fear many community members felt about speaking out. But he also discovered a network of people quietly fighting back, dedicated to protecting the voiceless. Later, as Marcus sat outside on a weathered bench, the dog resting quietly inside the center, he reflected on the journey so far. The highway had revealed a harsh reality, one of cruelty and neglect hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. But in this small rescue, he saw the other side of the story: resilience, compassion, and the determination to fight for change. He pulled out his phone again and typed a message to Sarah. "I'm ready to help. Tell me what you need." The reply was almost immediate. "Let's start by gathering information. We need to document abuse cases, build a network of witnesses and volunteers. Together, we can start turning the tide." Marcus looked up at the fading light, the horizon stretching wide and open. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time in days, he felt a sense of purpose. The dog's quiet breathing nearby was a reminder that even the smallest lives mattered, and that sometimes one act of kindness could spark a chain reaction. As night fell over the rescue center, Marcus prepared himself for the fight ahead. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, resistance, and danger. But he was no stranger to challenges. He had made a promise to the dog, to the countless others suffering in silence, and to himself, that he wouldn't turn away. The journey was just beginning. The sun filtered softly through the dusty windows of Hope Haven Animal Rescue, casting a warm glow on the worn wooden floors and walls lined with faded photographs of animals once lost but now found. Inside one of the small kennels, the scruffy dog curled into a ball atop a soft blanket, its breathing steady and more relaxed than the night Marcus had first found it. The bruises and cuts were healing, thanks to the care of Dr. Elena Martinez and the dedicated volunteers who had taken the dog under their wing. But it was more than just physical wounds that needed tending. The fear etched into the dog's eyes told a story of trauma that would take time to heal. Marcus Reed sat nearby, watching quietly as a young volunteer, a woman named Emily, approached the kennel with a bowl of water and a gentle smile. She spoke softly, her voice low and soothing as she crouched down and extended a hand. The dog hesitated, muscles tense, but then took a tentative step forward, lapping at the water with shaky eagerness. Marcus felt a flicker of something unexpected, a fragile hope. Beneath the layers of fear and pain, there was a spark of trust beginning to take hold. It reminded him of his own journey, the slow process of learning to rely on others after years of battle and isolation. Here, in this quiet sanctuary, he saw the first hints of a bond forming. Over the next few days, Marcus returned to Hope Haven regularly, each visit deepening his connection with the dog. He named him Ranger, after the countless miles they had traveled together along the Texas highways. With every gentle touch and quiet word, Ranger seemed to relax a little more, the walls around his heart starting to crumble. Marcus also spent time with the rescue volunteers, learning about their work and the challenges they faced. Their stories were sobering, tales of animals abandoned along highways, victims of neglect and cruelty, and the uphill battle to find them safe havens. But amid the hardship, there was a fierce determination, a shared commitment to giving these creatures a second chance. One afternoon, as Marcus helped Emily clear out an old storage room, the conversation turned to the bigger picture. "It's not just about saving one dog," Emily said, her eyes reflecting both weariness and passion. "We're trying to change how people see animals, as beings who deserve respect and care, not just property or pests." Marcus nodded. "I've seen how easy it is for cruelty to go unnoticed. People get so caught up in their own lives, they don't stop to see what's happening right under their noses." Emily smiled. "That's why folks like you are so important. You have the skills, the willpower to make noise, to hold people accountable." The two shared a quiet moment, the weight of their mission settling between them. It was a daunting task, but neither was willing to back down. Back at the kennel, Marcus sat on the floor beside Ranger, who now greeted him with a tentative wag of the tail. The dog's eyes, once filled with fear, now held a glimmer of something new, trust, perhaps even hope. Marcus reached out, running his fingers gently over Ranger's fur. The connection was subtle but powerful, a reminder that healing could begin in the quiet moments. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the rescue center, Marcus reflected on the journey so far. He had come seeking solitude on the open road, but found instead a calling. Ranger's story was just one thread in a larger tapestry of suffering and resilience, but it was enough to ignite a fire within him. He thought about the road ahead, the work that needed to be done, the lives that depended on it, and the obstacles they would face. But for now, in this small sanctuary, there was peace, a chance to rebuild trust, to nurture healing, and to forge a bond that transcended pain. Marcus knew that this was just the beginning. But as he sat beside Ranger, watching the dog finally relax and close his eyes, he allowed himself a rare moment of quiet satisfaction. In the shared silence between man and dog, a new chapter was unfolding. One written not in fear or pain, but in hope, compassion, and the promise of second chances. The morning light filtered through the cracked windows of the Hope Haven Animal Rescue Office, casting a soft glow over piles of paperwork, worn binders, and a cluttered bulletin board plastered with faded newspaper clippings and yellowed flyers. Marcus Reed sat at a wooden desk, the weight of the past weeks pressing heavily on his shoulders as he sifted through reports and case files. The story of Ranger was just one among many, but as he dug deeper, a darker pattern began to emerge. One that revealed a disturbing truth about the stretch of highway where he had found the dog. Animal abuse wasn't an isolated incident here. It was a grim, recurring reality, whispered about in hushed tones by volunteers and locals, but rarely addressed by those in power. Marcus's fingers traced the margins of a report detailing multiple complaints about stray animals found injured or dead along the highway. The names, dates, and locations painted a chilling picture. Abuse, neglect, and abandonment woven into the fabric of this community. He leaned back in his chair, the hard wood creaking beneath him, and stared out the window at the sprawling landscape beyond. The highway snaked through the dry earth, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through fields and small towns. It was a lifeline for commerce and travel. But for countless animals, it was a corridor of suffering. Marcus's mind replayed the moments he had witnessed. The trucker's ruthless kicks, the dog's trembling form, the indifferent glances of passers-by. But these were just fragments of a larger problem, one that went unnoticed or ignored by many. He realized that this cruelty was not just about individual acts of violence. It was about systemic failure, a community's blind spot where the vulnerable were left to fend for themselves. Determined to understand the scope of the issue, Marcus reached out to others who had seen the damage firsthand. He spoke with local animal control officers, volunteers at nearby shelters, and even a few ranchers who had found injured strays on their land. The stories echoed each other. Reports dismissed, investigations stalled, and abusers emboldened by the lack of consequences. One afternoon, Marcus met with Sheriff Tom Caldwell in his sparse office. The sheriff, a grizzled man with weathered features and a guarded expression, listened carefully as Marcus laid out his concerns. "I'm telling you, Sheriff, there's a pattern here. Animals are being abused and left to suffer along this highway, and something needs to be done," Marcus said, his voice steady but urgent. Sheriff Caldwell sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "I hear you, Marcus. Believe me, I do. But resources are tight, and we get a lot of complaints that don't lead anywhere. It's tough to prove anything without witnesses or evidence." Marcus nodded, understanding the challenge, but unwilling to accept it as an excuse. "What if we work together to gather more concrete evidence? Get the community involved? There has to be a way to break the cycle." The sheriff considered the proposal, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "If you're serious about this, I'm willing to listen. But you'll need support. This isn't something we can fix overnight." Encouraged, Marcus returned to Hope Haven with renewed purpose. He began compiling case files, photographs, and witness statements, building a dossier that detailed the extent of the problem. He reached out to Sarah and the volunteers, urging them to report every incident, no matter how small. Together, they started mapping abuse cases, identifying hotspots where neglect and violence were most concentrated. At the rescue center, Marcus also noticed a growing awareness among the volunteers and staff. Conversations shifted from individual rescues to strategies for prevention and intervention. The community was beginning to rally, albeit cautiously, around the cause. Yet, Marcus knew change wouldn't come easily. Deep-seated attitudes, economic hardships, and fear of retaliation created barriers that were difficult to overcome. Still, with each new report and every small victory, a dog saved, a case filed, momentum slowly built. One evening, as Marcus sat outside the rescue center watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, Ranger lumbered over, tail wagging tentatively. Marcus reached down to ruffle the dog's ears, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Ranger's journey, from abused stray to survivor, mirrored the larger fight Marcus had taken on. Both bore scars. Both were fighting for a future free from pain. Marcus's resolve hardened. He couldn't undo the past, but he could help shape what came next. The road ahead was long, filled with obstacles and uncertainty. But for the first time, he felt the stirrings of real change. As darkness settled over the town, Marcus stood and looked out toward the highway, the endless stretch of asphalt disappearing into the night. Somewhere along that road, more voices needed to be heard, more lives needed saving. And Marcus Reed was ready to be their voice. The small conference room at Hope Haven Animal Rescue was filled with a mix of determination and exhaustion. Volunteers gathered around a chipped wooden table, maps and case files spread before them like a battlefield plan. Marcus Reed stood at the head of the room, his posture steady and authoritative, the weight of the past weeks etched in the lines of his face. Around him, a handful of local animal advocates, shelter workers, and a few concerned townsfolk leaned in, eager to be part of the effort, but uncertain how to begin. "We need to get organized," Marcus began, his voice cutting through the tension. "The abuse along the highway isn't going to stop unless we come together. Document every incident, gather evidence, and push for action. But we can't do this alone. We need the community." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Sarah, the volunteer coordinator, nodded. People want to help, but many don't know where to start or are afraid of the consequences. Marcus met her gaze. "That's why we have to be smart and strategic. We need a network, witnesses, volunteers, and people willing to report abuse safely and anonymously. We'll train folks on what to look for and how to document it properly. Photos, dates, locations. Every detail matters." One of the volunteers, a middle-aged man named Frank, raised a hand. "And what about law enforcement? Will they back us up if we bring them solid evidence?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "We've made some progress. Sheriff Caldwell is open to working with us, but we have to build a case that's impossible to ignore. That means persistence and patience." The group spent the next several hours hashing out plans, organizing patrols along the highway, setting up a hotline for anonymous tips, and coordinating with veterinarians and shelters to track and report injuries linked to abuse. Flyers were designed to educate the public on signs of animal cruelty and the importance of reporting it. Social media campaigns were drafted to spread awareness beyond the immediate area. As the meeting wound down, Marcus felt a surge of cautious optimism. For the first time, the scattered efforts to combat animal abuse were coalescing into something tangible. A movement fueled by shared purpose and growing momentum. In the weeks that followed, Marcus threw himself into the work. He coordinated with Sarah and the volunteers, training them in evidence gathering and safety protocols. They held community forums, speaking to local schools, churches, and civic groups, urging people to watch out for vulnerable animals and to speak up when they saw abuse. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Calls to the hotline increased, reports of neglect and cruelty coming in from truck stops, farms, and roadside ditches. Volunteers patrolled stretches of highway, documenting evidence and intervening when possible. Local veterinarians reported an uptick in animals brought in with suspicious injuries, many linked back to the highway corridor. Marcus also cultivated relationships with sympathetic officers in the sheriff's department, sharing the growing dossier of cases and pushing for investigations. The sheriff's office, under community pressure, started prioritizing animal cruelty cases, assigning officers to follow up on leads. Despite the progress, the work was grueling and often frustrating. Some reports led nowhere. Witnesses recanted out of fear, and abusers slipped through the cracks. But each small victory, an animal saved, a perpetrator warned, fueled the group's resolve. One evening, Marcus sat in the rescue center's cramped office, reviewing new reports. A young woman named Lisa, a volunteer with a knack for organizing, knocked softly and entered. "We've got a tip about a truck driver seen abusing a dog near the last rest stop," she said, urgency in her voice. "It matches the description we've been tracking." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Let's get everything documented. Photos, witness statements. If we can catch him in the act, it could be the break we need." As Lisa left to organize the volunteers, Marcus stared out the window at the darkening highway beyond. The road was still long, and the fight far from over. But now, there was a network, a community rising up to protect the voiceless. And together, they were ready to challenge the silence and cruelty that had plagued these roads for too long. The night air hung heavy and still over the truck stop, the fluorescent lights casting a harsh glare on battered pickups and idling semis. Marcus Reed crouched behind a weathered picnic table just beyond the edge of the parking lot, his eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before him. A small crowd of truckers and travelers milled about, the low hum of whispered conversations mixing with the distant rumble of engines. But Marcus's focus was on one man, the truck driver they had been tracking for weeks. The driver was a bulky figure with a scar that ran along his jawline and a cold, hard expression that betrayed no hint of remorse. Earlier reports had described him kicking and striking a stray dog near the highway. And tonight, Marcus was determined to gather definitive evidence. Beside him, Sarah crouched, her hand steady on the camera she held. Volunteers had set up discreet positions around the lot, ready to document any sign of abuse. Marcus's heart pounded as he watched the man approach a small, scruffy dog tethered near his truck. The dog whimpered softly, tail tucked between its legs, eyes wide with fear. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. "There he is. Get ready." The trucker's foot came down hard, striking the dog's side. A sharp yelp pierced the air. The crowd fell silent, eyes darting nervously, but no one intervened. The man kicked again, this time with more force. Marcus's jaw tightened. Sarah's camera clicked rapidly, capturing every moment. "We've got it," she murmured. Marcus rose slowly, stepping into the light with deliberate calm. "That's enough," he said, voice steady but firm. The trucker spun, surprise flickering across his face before hardening into anger. "Who the hell are you?" he snarled. Marcus didn't flinch. "Someone who's done watching you hurt innocent animals." The man stepped forward, fists clenched. "You got a problem with me? Maybe you want a piece of me." Before the situation could escalate, a squad car pulled into the lot, lights flashing. Sheriff Tom Caldwell and 2 deputies emerged, their presence commanding immediate attention. "Step back, sir," the sheriff ordered the trucker. "You're under investigation for animal cruelty." The trucker sneered, but complied, hands raised in mock surrender. Marcus watched as deputies began collecting statements from witnesses and securing the scene. The evidence Sarah had gathered was irrefutable, a clear record of the abuse that had haunted the stretch of highway for too long. Later, at the sheriff's office, Marcus sat across from Sheriff Caldwell, the atmosphere tense but charged with cautious hope. "We've got him on tape, Marcus," the sheriff said, flipping through the photos. "This time we have solid grounds to press charges." Marcus nodded, relief washing over him. "It's a start. We need to make sure this sends a message." Sheriff Caldwell looked thoughtful. "There's more work to do, but this could be the turning point." As Marcus left the station, the weight of the moment settled over him. For weeks, they had been gathering evidence, building a case against the abuse that had long been ignored. Tonight, justice was within reach. Back at Hope Haven, the news spread quickly. Volunteers and community members gathered, their faces alight with a mixture of triumph and resolve. Ranger, now fully recovered, wagged his tail happily, a living symbol of resilience and hope. Marcus addressed the group, voice steady. "This is why we fight. Every animal deserves protection. Every voice matters. We've taken a stand tonight, but the road ahead is still long." The crowd nodded, united in purpose. Outside, the highway stretched on beneath a blanket of stars, silent witness to the battle fought within its shadows. But now, with courage and conviction on their side, Marcus and the community were ready to face whatever came next. The fight for justice had begun. The morning sun crept over the horizon, casting long shadows across the sleepy town that had become the epicenter of a growing movement. Marcus Reed stood outside the small community center, watching as neighbors, volunteers, and local officials gathered, their faces a mix of hope, determination, and cautious optimism. The atmosphere was electric. This was more than just a meeting. It was a turning point. Inside, the room buzzed with activity. Tables were lined with pamphlets, posters detailing signs of animal abuse, and contact information for local shelters and law enforcement. The walls bore photographs of rescued animals, their eyes bright with new life, a testament to what could be achieved when a community came together. Marcus stepped to the front, clearing his throat to command attention. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady and resolute. "We've made progress. Arrests have been made, and more eyes are watching the roads. But this is just the beginning. Protecting these animals requires all of us." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "We need to keep reporting abuse, supporting rescue efforts, and holding those responsible accountable. Change isn't easy, but it's possible when we stand united." Sarah stepped forward, sharing stories of recent rescues and the ongoing challenges faced by shelters overwhelmed with injured and abandoned animals. Volunteers spoke of organizing patrols, educating the public, and raising funds to expand their reach. The energy in the room was contagious, fueling a collective commitment that transcended individual struggles. Outside, Titan, a large German shepherd, wagged his tail enthusiastically as his handler, Officer Vance, greeted attendees. The local police had stepped up their involvement, and Titan had become a symbol of the partnership between law enforcement and the community. Together, they represented a new era of vigilance and care. As the meeting progressed, Marcus found himself reflecting on how far they had come. What had begun as a solitary act of compassion on a lonely highway had blossomed into a community-driven movement. Reports of abuse were rising, not because cruelty was increasing, but because people were no longer silent. They were watching, listening, and acting. Later that evening, Marcus stood on a ridge overlooking the town, the fading light painting the sky in hues of amber and violet. Beside him, Ranger rested peacefully, his once fearful eyes now calm and trusting. The dog's journey mirrored the community's, a transformation born of care, courage, and unwavering resolve. Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "We've got new volunteers signing up every day. The tide is turning." He smiled, feeling a profound sense of purpose. The road ahead was still long and fraught with challenges. But together, they were building a future where animals were protected, voices were heard, and justice prevailed. As night settled over the town, Marcus took a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs. In that moment, he knew that from the darkest places, hope could emerge. And with hope, change was not just possible. It was inevitable. The morning light spilled gently over the rolling hills surrounding the small town, casting a golden glow on the bustling animal shelter, where Hope Haven had become a beacon of change. Inside, volunteers moved with purpose, tending to cages, cleaning kennels, and preparing meals for the animals now safe within its walls. Among them, Ranger lay comfortably in a sunlit corner, his tail thumping softly against the floor as he watched the activity with calm eyes. Marcus Reed stood near the entrance, watching the scene unfold with a sense of quiet satisfaction. The journey that had begun with a stray dog, left bruised and battered by the roadside, had grown into something far greater. A movement fueled by compassion, determination, and the unwavering belief that every life mattered. Beside Marcus, Sarah approached, carrying a clipboard filled with adoption applications and volunteer sign-ups. "Ranger's doing well," she said with a smile. "And the community's response has been incredible. People are stepping up in ways we never imagined." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of their shared effort. "It's more than just saving animals," he said softly. "It's about changing hearts and minds. The shelter had become a hub for education and outreach, hosting workshops on animal care and cruelty prevention, and partnering with local schools to teach children the value of kindness. Reports of abuse along the highways had decreased thanks to increased vigilance and community involvement. Law enforcement now prioritized these cases, and those responsible were held accountable. Outside, the sun warmed the earth as families arrived, eager to meet the animals waiting for forever homes. Children laughed as they played with puppies, and volunteers guided hopeful adopters through the rows of kennels. The shelter was alive with hope, a testament to what could be achieved when a community united. Marcus watched as Ranger approached a young girl, tail wagging, and gently accepted a tentative pet. The dog's eyes met Marcus's, filled with trust and a quiet joy that spoke volumes. It was a moment of redemption, a symbol of healing born from pain. As the day wore on, Marcus found a quiet spot overlooking the town, the horizon stretching wide and open before him. He reflected on the journey, the cruelty witnessed, the battles fought, and the lives changed. The road had been long and fraught with challenges, but it had also been filled with moments of grace and resilience. He thought of the countless animals still in need, the work yet to be done, and the community that had come together to protect the voiceless. Marcus understood that the fight against cruelty was ongoing, but he also knew that hope had taken root. In the fading light, he sent a message to Sarah. "We've come far, but this is just the beginning. Let's keep fighting." Her reply was immediate. "Together, we'll make sure no one suffers in silence." Marcus closed his phone and looked out over the town, the stars beginning to twinkle in the deepening sky. In that moment, he felt a profound peace, a reminder that even in the darkest places, heroes could emerge, and from the smallest acts of kindness, a brighter future could be built. The journey continued, but for now, there was hope.